Let's continue exploring the universe within art and the art within Redstone. I'm your host, Amledu, and in this video we're going to go over how to create your very own custom item sorters, like how to link together shulker loaders, unloaders with multi-item sorters with your regular sorting cells, and also how to stack some of these things on top of each other so that you can sort multiple items. This video was requested by the user that you see here on the screen, so I'm going to do my best to give you all of the information that you could possibly need to ever build your own custom item sorters. This is also a continuation of my item sorter guide, so if you'd like to see how to build the item sorters, go check that video out. And I don't actually have tutorials for the multi-item sorter or the shulker loaders and unloaders, but if that's something you would like me to do, just let me know in the comments and I will do my best to get it done. But there are tons of different designs from different people here on the YouTubes. There is a lot of stuff that we need to cover to answer any potential questions that you might have, so you can always check the timestamps if you want to skip to a specific section. But the first thing we need to talk about is how to move items up and down. Moving them down is fairly straightforward using hoppers or hoppers and chests, but moving them up is a little more complicated. Now it's still super easy to use dropper elevators in order to move items up, but this is something that you will need to know when building your custom item sorters because different sorters or different types of machines are going to be at different heights. Now, anytime you use a dropper elevator, you always want it to be activated by a comparator. I've seen a lot of tutorials and people use just infinite clocks in order to power their dropper elevators, and not only is this noisy and annoying from the droppers clicking, but it's also a waste. You're creating additional lag for no reason at all. So always avoid infinite clocks or clocks that you have to turn on and off, and just use comparators. I promise that it's easy. So the comparator is going to be looking at the bottom dropper, and then it is going to be powering some kind of clock. In this specific example, whenever the dropper has any number of items in it, the comparator will activate the piston, which will then trigger the observer clock to start going. But there are a ton of different ways that you can do this if you don't want to use observers. So this is a comparator clock. When the comparator activates, it will activate the repeater, which will then turn off the comparator from the side input, and then it will activate the bottom dropper with this leftmost redstone, and then activate the top droppers with the redstone on top. And since the redstone is pointed directly into a dropper, it will activate the droppers on top and bottom of that one. And the main reason I'm going over different designs is to hopefully give you a better understanding of how this actually works, so that no matter what kind of space you're working with when it comes to your storage system, hopefully you'll be able to rig something up that will work. Now when it comes to really tall dropper elevators, you will need the clock to activate all of the droppers. Now it's honestly best to do this with redstone torches like you see here, but I would like to show that there are other ways to get it done if for some reason you can't or don't want to use torches. So, here we have the exact same comparator clock. The comparator activates the repeater, which turns off the comparator, but then we worked our way up using glass as to not pinch the redstone. That way the redstone will reach the entire line of droppers. But again, this isn't necessarily the most efficient way to do this. In my opinion, using torches and blocks is the best way to power dropper elevators. And the main reason for that is that you only have to send the redstone from the clock to the bottommost torch. Just turning on and off this bottommost torch will turn on and off all of the other torches in the system. And so for this example, the comparator is turning off this torch, which will turn off this piston, which will then activate the observer clock. And so, just to show an example of how exactly this works, if we throw a few items into the bottommost dropper, it will activate that comparator, which will then activate the clock, and then the items will just start coming out of the top. But if you don't want to use pistons and observers, the design that I actually use when playing is something like this. So it's just a comparator clock that uses comparators and repeaters, so the comparator will activate the first repeater anytime there is any items in the bottom dropper, and then that repeater will turn off the comparator, making a comparator clock. Then the second repeater is just to separate the redstone so that it actually toggles the torches. But even though this is the design that I would recommend, you could also use a bubble elevator, but bubbles are kind of laggy, so I would avoid those. If you would like to do something similar to a bubble elevator, you can make one of these. Now I don't really know what to call this, but if you make a 3x3 tower of solid blocks, they don't have to be glass, I just use glass so you can actually see the items. If you use a dropper to spit items inside of that tower, the item physics will actually cause the items to go up through the blocks. So if we throw some items in here, you can actually see how this works. Now, abusing item physics like this, is kind of neat, But sometimes it's kind of weird. You know, for like this specific design, if we break these random two glass up here, the items just decide to fall out of the side. So it is actually nice to build this out of glass, even though you don't have to, just so that you can see exactly how the items are behaving. Now, this one right here is a little more stable. Having the dropper in the center of the 3x3 tower is a lot more stable, but your clock has to be slightly bigger in order to power it. So again, we just have a comparator clock where the comparator is activating the repeater, which is then activating both droppers and turning off the comparator, thus making a clock. And so with this one, we don't need any extra blocks because the dropper is in the very center, so the item physics tend to be more stable. And then we just have some running water up at the top to push those items into a hopper, and then a button to stop the water from flowing out. Okay, and so now we know how to move items up and how to move them down. This is very crucial for custom item sorters because like shulker loaders and multi-item sorters are all going to be at different heights, especially depending on which design you end up building. So it's good to know because they all need to share the same input line. And while we're on the topic of moving items around, it's also good to note that you can combine different item sorter cells into a single chest. Like this could be 4 different item sorters, all funneled into the same chest, just by using hoppers and chest to redirect the items. And really, you could go as big as you want to. You could sort all of the different types of dye or all the different types of concrete, down into a single chest using standard item sorters. And a lot of times, this is the method that I will use to sort similar items together. Rather than using a multi-item sorter where you have to leave one item in every single slot, I'll build the standard item sorter, but I'll stack it on top of each other and then merge the cells together. So like here, we have 8 different item sorters that will all sort all of their items into a single chest. And so if you stack these standard item sorters on top of each other, it makes it really easy to sort similar items together. Like a lot of times I'll do like all of the variations of cobblestone down into the same chest. But now let's touch on tiling item sorters next to each other. It's always okay to put multiples of the same type of item sorter next to each other, but sometimes it can be a little weird or not work if you put different types of item sorters directly next to each other. But first off, let's talk about this non-stackable item filter because I've had a few people ask recently how you keep it from skipping items. Like if you have a gold farm or something like that, you want non-stackable item filters to pull out all of the golden swords so that they don't clutter up your inventory or your chests. A single non-stackable item filter will pull out most of the swords, but when it comes to farms, just because of the sheer amount of swords that are going through it, or because of the occasional lag spike, it will skip a sword or two. To prevent this, all you have to do is build another non-stackable item filter next to the first one, and they can be right next to each other. Even though the redstone is connected now, it won't interfere with how the sorter cells work. Now, one thing you do need to change is you need to redirect the bottom redstone so that it will actually turn off the torches. You do this simply by replacing the solid blocks that the torches are on with target blocks. The target blocks will redirect the redstone into itself, allowing you to toggle the torches with the redstone signal. Now the reason you can build these right next to each other is they will never have a signal strength greater than 3, because a non-stackable item going through a hopper will have a signal strength of 3. Now when it comes to tiling different types of item sorters next to each other, some of them will work and some of them will not. So here we have the yellow one is an overflow protected, the orange one is a non-overflow protected, and the blue one is a non-stackable item filter. A good rule of thumb is just to avoid tiling different types next to each other. Leave some space in between the different types of sorter cells. Especially the overflow protected design can't be built next to the other ones. So here I built all 3 next to each other. Again, the blue is a non-stackable item filter with a backwards comparator. The orange is a non-overflow protected. The yellow is an overflow protected. And that comparator is really bugging me, but it's okay, it won't affect what we're doing. But first we need to replace the block on the non-stackable item filter with a target block to redirect the redstone, just like we did before when it came to tiling the non-stackable item filter, and we need to replace the torch. And so now the non-stackable item sorter can be tiled. Except that, okay, so we have a non-overflow protected sorter right here. So generally, it won't get above a signal strength of 2 unless it overflows. If it overflows, it will reach a signal strength of 3, which will break the non-stackable item filter next to it. So you can put these next to each other, But if it overflows, it will not only break itself, but it will break the adjacent non-stackable item filters. And then the overflow protected design won't work with any of them because it reaches a signal strength of 3 in order to activate. But if you tile it next to a non-stackable item sorter, it will activate the non-stackable item sorter every time it reaches a signal strength of 2. And once you've loaded the item being sorted, it will always be at a signal strength of 2. So you definitely can't put that one next to a non-stackable item sorter. Now when it comes to the overflow protected and non-overflow protected, they cannot go next to each other. Now the orange non-overflow protected usually doesn't reach a signal strength of 3, so most of the time it will be fine. But when it overflows, it will reach a signal strength of 3, which will then activate the other item sorter. But the yellow overflow protected one will just constantly activate the non-overflow protected design at a signal strength of 2, and it will always have a signal strength of 2 once you load the item being sorted. So you definitely can't build those next to each other. So basically, just avoid trying to tile different types of item sorters directly next to each other. And I'm sorry if that was complicated or boring, I just wanted to touch on it just in case some of you were curious as to why you can't tile different types of sorters next to each other. But when it comes to the same type of sorter, you can go nuts. You can tile as many of them next to each other as you want without any problems, except for maybe overflow. Okay, we have covered all of the basics. Now it's time to talk about placement and planning. So first I want to quickly touch on chunk borders. Now you don't have to chunk align, so don't worry, but there are a few things to know about chunk borders. Now if you have your locked hopper, like your filter hopper that has the items being sorted on one side of a chunk, and then you have the blocks that are locking that hopper on the other chunk, it is possible for the hopper to unlock itself if you unload the chunk that's locking it. Now this isn't supposed to happen, but it could. Now one thing to always avoid in any redstone is having observers that are looking at chunk borders. Now they will activate when you load the chunk. Now this won't always affect things, but with multi-item sorters or shulker loaders, it could. It just depends on what type of design you're using to build these. So it's just good to know. And then continuing about placement and planning, this is a shulker loader. So if you want to have shulker loaders in your item sorter cells, just remember that they are very tall, and you will need an item sorter above them to dictate what item is going into them. And since there are so many different ways to build these, and because they're tall, I would recommend maybe building them first so you know how tall your input line needs to be. Now you could also build a shulker unloader, which is what you see here. This could be your input so that you could just throw all of your shulker boxes into a chest and then tell it to unload all of the items out of there and go into your item sorter. Now you can accomplish the same thing just by using hoppers. The shulker unloader can process more shulker boxes, but what I usually do is just build a wall out of obsidian or nether wart, something that's hard to mine with your pickaxe so I don't accidentally break the wall when I break out the shulker boxes. But no matter what way you unload your shulkers, this will be at the very beginning of your machine. This is where you put in all of the items that you want to be sorted. And so this is where you should start when building a custom item sorter, is where do you want to put the items that are going to be sorted? And one of the reasons I've been rambling so much about different mechanics is that you kind of need to plan the layout of your storage system first. Start with where the input is, and then figure out where you're going to run your input line. That is where all of your items are going to travel to go to all the different item sorters. Keeping in mind how much room you will need behind the input line in order to run the redstone for the different types of sorters, as well as how many chests you want for each item that is being sorted. If you build your input line 4 blocks above the ground, you will only have room for 2 stacked chests, like you see here. So if you want to have more chests, you need to raise your input line before you even start. So if you want 3 stacked chests, you need to have this initial input line to be 5 above the ground. That is 4 blocks in between the ground and the input line. And so you need to figure out how many chests you want before you start building it so that you know how far above the ground your bottom input line needs to be. Especially if you plan on stacking item sorters on top of each other. Since it's easier to move items down, typically your bottommost input line will be after your higher up input lines. They will kind of go down in an S-type shape. Now there needs to be 3 blocks of space in between each input line if you're planning on stacking item sorter cells. And keep in mind that this is just for the stacking of standard item sorter cells. If you also want shulker loaders in the mix somewhere, you need to figure out how tall those are and, plan accordingly, because your input line is going to need to be above them, and most shulker loaders are also going to need an item sorter as well. And then if you want a multi-item storage system, I would recommend putting it at the very end of the line, right before your overflow chests. And that's why I started off by explaining how to make items go up and down using dropper elevators or hoppers. Because all of these different things are going to be different heights. So if you want to, change things as you go, you're going to need to just insert a dropper elevator in order to change the elevation of the items. So like if we start off with a shulker loader, it's already kind of tall to put in your shulkers, and then the output is already pretty low, so we wouldn't have room to put, sorter cells in there. So we would need to attach this to a dropper elevator to lift the items up so that we then have room to build item sorters, underneath the intake line. And this is just as simple as connecting some hoppers to the output of your shulker unloader and attaching that to a dropper elevator. So now whenever shulker boxes or items get unloaded into it, it will just go into your dropper elevator and then continue up into your line. And so really, don't worry if you're having trouble planning out your storage system. You can always just insert dropper elevators to give you more room to work with if you want to change something, like add more chests or add another shulker loader or something like that. Or you could even bypass the initial dropper elevator if you build your intake above your storage system. To be honest, a lot of times I will build my intake above my storage system. Maybe close to my nether portal or something like that. That way I can just drop in my items above my item sorter, then they'll go through the hopper line and filter all the way down, and then whenever I want to actually access my storage system, I can just jump down. Or you could build like a staircase up to your input section. It's all up to you, whether you use a staircase or build it above or use a dropper elevator. Either way, you need to raise the items up to like the highest point that they will be when going through the storage system right off the bat. But now let's go to an example of actually building one of these. I've rambled on and on about all the different mechanics. I'm really sorry for that. I hope it made sense and I hope it wasn't too tedious or boring, but now we're going to actually build somewhat of an example of how you link all of these together. So hopefully everything that I've talked about so far will all come together and make sense right now. Okay, so first things first, we need to figure out where our intake is and where our output is. So we have a multi-item sorter over here next to our overflow, and so this is where all of the items are going to end up that either didn't get sorted or that get sorted into the multi-item. And then in the middle, we have these standard sorting cells that I'm going to stack on top of each other so that I can sort multiple things into the same chests. And then we have a shulker loader right here near the beginning. Since the shulker loader is going to be really tall and it's going to be loading common items, we want it near the beginning. And then we also have a shulker unloader right here if we want to unload mass amounts of shulkers. And then we just have a standard item input over here. So start off by building your input just wherever you want it. You can always change where the input line goes from there. And so we're going to link the normal standard one to our shulker unloader just by adding a couple hoppers, like so. We connected the outputs of these together, and now we need to make the items go up, so we need to connect that to a dropper elevator. And keep in mind that if you're using a shulker unloader, most of these will not start themselves automatically. You will need to press a button to dispense your very first shulker box before it automatically unloads all of the other shulker boxes in the chest. So you will need access to a chest to load the shulkers and a button to start the process. But once you've built your input, you need to connect that to a dropper elevator that will lift the items up tall enough to go through whatever other types of sorting cells that you want. If you want to stack the item cells, or if you want shulker loaders, you need to figure out how tall this intake line needs to be. And so before building your intake line, go ahead and build a shulker loader if you're going to use one so that you know how tall the line needs to be. Or if you want to stack item sorters on top of each other, go ahead and build an example slice just so that you know where all the intakes need to go and how many chests you'll be left with as your storage. And keep in mind that with stacking item sorters, you will have to weave the intake line, up and around horizontally and then down and around horizontally so that it reaches all of the different sorting cells that you're planning on building. But we'll talk more about that in a minute. Now, as for shulker loaders, again, I recommend building these at the beginning of the machine because they are going to be a custom height, and they're going to need to have an item sorter on top of them to dictate what item is being loaded into shulker boxes. Plus, these items are probably going to be fairly common, so it's nice to take those out of the system as quickly as possible. And then build your standard item sorter cells somewhere in the middle. I also recommend building non-overflow protected on top and then overflow protected below that if you're going to be merging items together. It would be really hard for the non-overflow protected to actually back up, when there's tons of hoppers and chests going down. And then if the bottom one is overflow protected, it won't matter how many items, get funneled down into there, it will always be safe. And this is just as easy as connecting the frontmost output chest together using hoppers and chests. Just keep things away from the redstone torches. If you build the output one forward so that the hoppers are pushing items forward rather than down, this will totally avoid the redstone torches. So if you build it like you see here, you can connect all of the outputs together very nice and easy. Now also keep in mind that you will need to weave your intake line in between your item sorter layers if you are stacking them. So it's going to need to go down and then back at some point, and the intake lines are generally going to be directly underneath each other. And we also need to keep in mind where our output is going to be, especially if you want like a multi-item sorter near the output, you're going to need to funnel your intake line all the way over here at some point. And also keep in mind that your intake line needs to be a single tube. Even if it's a curvy tube, you just can't branch it off into multiple directions, or the items will end up somewhere random and not get sorted. So you need a single tube that goes from beginning to end. So once you have some examples of your sorting cells so that you know that you have enough room, I would recommend going ahead and connecting your input line from the start all the way to the finish so that you know exactly where your input line is going to go. And so again, once you have some examples built to make sure that your input line is at the right heights and will allow you to build sorting cells, if you're chunk aligning, go ahead and start counting out, so you have enough area to place the redstone behind the lines, and then just connect your lines together. So sometimes it's as simple as what you see here, and now we have a tube that goes from start to finish that funnels through this little section right here that allows us to double stack item sorter cells. Now, the main problem with this is we don't have room over here to double stack item cells, or we also don't have room on the other side to double stack item cells. And so if we want to stack more item sorters than we have now, we will have to change our tube just a little bit. Now, again, this is another reason that I recommend building your tube first. If you build your intake line, it's much easier to change your intake line than it is to delete, entire item sorter cells that you've already built. So just go ahead and try to visualize where you want your item sorters to be, and then build your tube in a way that you can just kind of insert the item sorters onto the tube. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to curve this topmost line around so that we have room for another row of double stacked item sorters. A lot of times I will build like a giant S in the sky out of the hoppers for our topmost intake, and then you kind of move that down, build another S underneath that, and then eventually run that off to the output. And really, the hardest thing to keep in mind when stacking item sorters is that your intake tube is going to like double back upon itself for every single layer. So like if your top layer is going from left to right, the layer underneath that is going to be going from right to left. And so at some point you're going to have to crisscross it back to get to the end of your intake tube where your output is going to be. So a lot of times I will build this 3 stories tall rather than 2 stories like we're doing now. That way it loops back upon itself twice. And so it ends up going to the end without you having to do some weird crisscrossy thing like I'm doing right now. Like you have to, loop the intake line all the way around going in the same direction, but cutting through, the cells that are going to be underneath the topmost line. I really hope that makes sense. But now that we looped it back, we have more room for double stacked item cells in this little area right here. And so once you get your intake tube kind of situated with your examples so that you know where you can build item sorters, now it's just time to expand. So if you built some examples, all you have to do is just kind of copy your examples to expand them further. Now it also helps if you build them correctly, like I didn't really build this one correctly. I put that block too high and didn't put redstone dust on it, but this gives you an opportunity to make sure all of your item sorters are built correctly, and then you just kind of expand them, which it's much easier to expand them once you have everything laid out than it is to just start kind of building this from scratch and trying to line everything up. So again, build your input, build your output, build some example cells, and then build your intake tube, and then just start filling in cells inside of your intake tube. And then when it comes to merging cells, I recommend trying to merge as much of the top together as you can. And what I mean by that is if you have, an item that you want to have 8 different sorters going into a single chest, try to make like 7 of them come from the top and funnel them down into a single one from the bottom. This will help conserve like hoppers and help conserve space at the bottom when it comes to laying out your chest room. So like here, we have 6 different item sorters at the top being merged down with the 2 item sorters at the bottom. And then we have one more sorter cell at the top that is unused. So we're going to go ahead and hook this up, and we're just going to funnel this all the way down to the bottom. So even if you do merge some of the bottom cells together, you could always just run one of the top cells all the way down to the bottom and have it be its own chest. So like this one cell from the top is now being funneled down into those bottom chests. And I also recommend loading your filter hoppers as you're merging the layers so that you know exactly what you need to merge together. And so like if you're sorting all the different types of cobblestone or something, load the filter hoppers with the stairs of cobblestone and with the slabs of cobblestone and all of the variations that you want to sort into the same chest, before you actually start merging those cells together. So if you load the filter hoppers first, you can always check and see to make sure which ones actually need to be merged together. Now I also do try to plan this out. I'll kind of write down how many I'll need for like cobblestone or how many I need for like nether stuff or whatever I'm trying to merge down into, single chests. That way I kind of have a guideline of like how many filters I'm going to need per chest. And I'll try to do the biggest ones first. So like if I need 8 different item sorters to sort all the different types of cobblestone, I'll do that one first and load, all different 8 types into the filter hoppers and then combine them all into the chest. But now for this example, we have 10 different items being sorted and funneled down into those bottom chests. And we still have 3 more sorter cells to go. And so now it also gets kind of interesting fitting your chest together on the bottom row. Now it really helps out if you, combine the top row first so that you don't have extra hoppers coming down. It helps you kind of wiggle around if you need to orient your chest rooms in different ways, depending on, how exactly you want your chests to be. But you can still kind of fit tiny chests in between big chests and still kind of, squish different cells in there. So like now, this middle section has 2 different items being sorted into these single chests right here. And then this far right section also has 2 items, one from the bottom and one from the top, being funneled down into those big chests on the bottom. And so really, this is super duper custom. I really hope that it's making sense. If not, let me know in the comments and I will do my best to help you out and try to explain it in another way. But, this is just so custom that it really just depends on what you're trying to sort together. Like what items are you trying to merge together into the same chests? And if you ever change your mind about the groupings, you can always just change the hoppers. But okay, we are almost done. There's only 2 more things that I would like to talk about before we end this video. The first one being that it is totally fine to mirror the item sorter cells behind each other where the redstone is all connected, especially the overflow protected design. This one won't interact with each other at all. And so let me build this really quick, going behind the other one where all of the redstone ends up being connected. And then I'll explain really quickly why this works. But this is super helpful, for condensing your storage cells. Like the more item sorter cells you have, the bigger this is. And so if you kind of loop it like we did in this example, you can kind of build some of them squished up next to each other in the back. And now you will have like 2 different hallways full of chests, but what I do a lot of times is have like one hallway for blocks and one hallway for items. But the reason why this works is that the overflow protected design, it will never get above a redstone strength of 3, and it would need to get to a redstone strength of 4 in order to interact with the other cells. So no matter what happens, it can never interact with the other cells as long as the item filter is loaded properly. If you're unsure about how to load the item filter properly, be sure to check out my other sorter video. But then when it comes to the non-overflow protected design, you can build these back to back as well with the redstone connected, but you will have the same issue that non-overflow protected always has, is that if it becomes overflowed, or if it fills up completely, it will reach a signal strength of 3, which will interact with the nearby cells. So you could always just leave a gap in between them if you're going to buddy them up next to each other, behind each other. This will make it completely safe since the redstone's not connected. Or if you have overflow protected designs under it, then you really won't be able to merge them together anyway. So there will be a gap of 2, if you end up mirroring the designs back to back, if you have overflow protected cells underneath it, that is. Because the overflow protected ones are 4 blocks wide, where these non-overflow protected are only 3 blocks wide. And for this side, just to give an example, I'm going to merge the cells together slightly differently. I'm going to have the chest be sideways rather than front facing, just to conserve space if that's something that you would like to do, especially since in this example, it's right next to the multi-item sorter. So I'm going to try to conserve as much space as I can. And then I'm also going to just merge a single top cell with a single bottom cell. So each of the bottom chests will only have 2 items being sorted down into that chest. And so all we're going to do is make lines of chests and then just hopper all the way up. But you still want to place containers in between each hopper just to make it a little cheaper. On the iron, this really doesn't affect anything at all other than saves you on iron. So we're just going to place chests and then hoppers and then chests and then hoppers until we connect all the cells together. And now all of these bottom rows of chests will have 2 items going down into each one of those chests. And then of course you could always just expand it further by adding more hoppers and chests at the bottom. And that's basically it. There's only one more thing I want to talk about, and that is a simple tip on hiding your redstone. Trying to make all of these ugly hoppers disappear. And again, I really hope this makes sense. If it doesn't, just ask me any questions that you can think of in the comments and I will do my best to help you out. But when it comes to hiding all of this nonsense, just remember that you can place stairs on top of chests and you'll still be able to open those chests. And you can place the stair in any orientation. You don't actually have to place it from the front. If you place it from the back, it will look like it's a solid block, but you will still be able to open the chest. And this also means that you can put item frames on the back of the stairs so that you can label what chests, are full of what items. This is super duper helpful. I almost always do this, not only because it looks really clean, but it also looks kind of fancy because it's like, why are those chests blocked with solid blocks, man? You won't be able to open your chests, but then you actually can open them. Plus, you can use item frames to easily display what's supposed to go where. Now, I will say it can be a little awkward to place the stairs backwards, especially in survival. It always takes me a minute to actually get the stairs in there backwards so that it looks like solid blocks. But once it's there, it's done, everything's hidden, and you can still open your chests. One other thing to mention is that chests can also be opened if there's hoppers on top of them or glass on top of them. Basically, any block that isn't a solid block, chest will still be able to open. So if you have some space issues and you have to have, hoppers directly above your chests, that is totally fine. You will still be able to open the chest and you can kind of surround the hoppers with walls or stairs or something. Now you will kind of be able to see the hoppers a little bit. Sometimes if I don't like that, I will actually build part of the item sorter out of black concrete, and that will kind of hide the hoppers so that I can't see them anymore. But that's really nitpicking at that point. But that's all we got for this video. I really hope it made sense. Let me know in the comments if you're confused or have any questions, and I will do my best to either answer them or to make a more concise video explaining your specific inquiries. Mainly for this video, I just wanted to touch on every possible thing that you might need to know for making your own custom item sorters. And I'm sure I left some stuff out, but I already just had so much stuff it seemed very rambly to me at times. And so again, I really hope it made sense, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, share, and subscribe. And if you didn't, leave a comment and let me know why, or let me know what you're looking for. Also, if you have any requests, feel free to let me know, and I will do my best to get it done. But until next time, I've been your host, Omeledu, hopefully teaching you a redstone trick or two. And reminding you, as always, don't forget to have fun. Bye-bye!